Thank you and welcome to this webinar about the new JD Edwards Sustainability Framework. Today, our JD Edwards experts, Sander and Mark, will be guiding us through this session to cover all relevant aspects of the framework. Thank you, Sander and Mark, for being here today in front of this international audience.
Hello, everyone.
As you can see, this is the agenda we will cover during the next hour or so, where we will go through a brief introduction of who we are, who is Steltix, talk about Release 25, dive into some regulations within Europe and US. Also, we will talk about the benefits of using the framework in your day-to-day operations. And we will reserve some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can just write them on the Q&A section in this webinar, and we will go through them at the end. All right, let's start. At Steltix, we are proud to be a team of more than 250 experts focused on JD Edwards practice for more than 25 years now. Being an Oracle partner, we ensure to always use best practices and deliver the best possible service to our clients. We have recently expanded to other regions with presence now in Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Asia Pacific. So there you can see some of the cities where we have local offices. That covers a wide range of countries. Now moving on to our services. Our services cover a full range of the JD Edwards life cycle that goes from advisory to delivery and then support. Due to our recent expansion to other regions, we can now say we offer a 24/7 capability to support our clients across all time zones. We have also developed our own products as a result of common client needs, making them part of the JD Edwards daily operations. We are really also proud to offer our unique instructor-led training worldwide with live classes within a great range of topics. And before we start, I'd like to share more information about our products. If any of them resonates with you, please don't hesitate to send us a message and we will be happy to provide more information after this meeting. So AppShare, if you click one more time, it's our tool to help work with JD Edwards from anywhere. So it's doing JD transactions from your mobile with your barcode or scanners, and that really gives flexibility to our clients. Then we also have our newest solution, which is our invoicing automation solution, or the evolution of our APA solution, which is our accounts payable automation. Our invoicing automation now covers the inbound and outbound invoice processing. So due to increasing worldwide regulations on invoicing, we thought it was time to create this other part for the solution. Transparent Logon has been there for quite a long time now, and it's a single sign-on and multi-factor authentication tool. Dropzone, it's a tool that helps mass data updates to JD Edwards, just dragging and dropping an Excel sheet. Version Workbench also helps with backup and restore processing option values and data selections across JD versions. And one of our latest ones as well, with collaboration with Oracle, is Oracle Guided Learning for JD Edwards, which is a digital in-app coach that guides users to perform processes in JD Edwards. So it's a really complementary part of our training. And we are receiving great feedback for that one as well. So now, without further ado, I'll pass it on to Sander, who will talk about the ESG regulatory requirements. Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Andrea. Welcome, everybody. And I'd like to start with a little bit of background of where we come from in the ESG regulatory requirements. So as you can see on screen, in Europe, there was already an initiative called the Non-Financial Reporting Directive since 2014, which is basically transformed into the CSRD, which started in 2021 and finalized in 2023, and which will be implemented as of today already in stages up to 2029. So that's part of Europe. If we now have a look at the USA, there was also an initiative, which is really only started in 2022 and finalized in 2024. This should also be adopted by large accelerated fillers, which have a turnover of more than 700 million as of 2025. But currently is put on hold due to some lawsuits stated by some large companies in the USA. So for the USA, it's currently put on hold. Then we have all kinds of other regulations where the framework is basically collecting data for and where you can report on. These are, like we said, CSRD, ERS in Europe. You see the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission for the USA, but also GRI, Global Reporting Initiatives, and the ISSB, International Sustainability Board, which are adopting these ESG regulations and disclosures and standards. And Oracle states that when capturing data in the framework, it can meet the reporting requirements for these standards. So the framework is basically released since 25, so release 25. And yeah, so let's see what is part of release 25. So we started with the enterprise automation process modeler, which is a big new functionality within JD Edwards, where you have a graphical tool designing processes and relationships among processes, and where you can really define the metrics on how those processes are running. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the sustainability framework, of course, which is then brought in place to simplify and streamline basically the collection of the environmental data that should be done. Yes. So what is in now? For now, what is released is indeed what I just mentioned, but what is planned? So planned in the near future is also the collecting of the purchased entity data for Scope 2. And there are some enhancements already in place for development by Oracle, like the geographical location in the preferencing. So that's more technical one, but also the data collection of the Scope 2 and 3 emissions are planned. And basically in the backlog are the integration of Scope 1 and 2, but then more in JD Edwards itself, so that the applications can support that automation, and the Scope 3 emissions and water and waste management. So that's the roadmap from Oracle. So what are we talking about again? So we have the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3s. And for now, what JD Edwards supports is basically the Scope 1, the direct emission reporting in your company. So how does the framework look? So basically, JD Edwards will be your data collector, the database where we can capture the data while doing transactions. So it's not in the separate database that you have to type something in there, but you can do it straight away in JD Edwards. Also, interfaces can be made for data upload from other systems. It says here spreadsheets, manual entry also possible, but in fact, you can put on all kinds of APIs to gather your data. JD Edwards is not the reporting tool, it's really the data collector. And the reporting can be done via pre-configured integrations with, for instance, Oracle EPM, which is really a reporting tool to do this. So here are some examples of what Oracle EPM can do. For instance, they have insights where you can really have the reporting on usage and trends during time, but also pre-filled with CSRD report templates, for instance, like the example in the slide. So now I want to give the floor to Mark, because he's now going to show you some nice demoing in JD Edwards itself.
Yeah, thank you, Sander. So at the start of the presentation, I was really able to present myself. I'm Mark, a consultant at Steltix for almost 5 years, doing implementations together with Sander, and currently diving into the sustainability framework, which is a very nice new feature from JD Edwards. So in this section, I'd like to point out 3 key benefits and to to give you an idea of what that looks like in the system itself. So what we came up with is that basically you could have 3 key benefits of the sustainability framework, which could be that it's data friendly, it's streamlined, and it's effortless. Yeah, those are pretty generic words, so I will give you some more detail for that. So why is it data friendly? All your data will be collected in a single activity ledger. This ledger allows you to perform all kinds of reporting in external system. And it's built in that way that the other system is easily able to understand the data that is captured within JD Edwards. It also allows automatic audit history tracking, which is perfect for audit purposes. And if you implement it wisely, it could become like a key backbone for eventual emission calculation and also reporting. And as Sander already mentioned, if you would be using Oracle EPM and you would combine it with JD Edwards, yeah, that would be a very wise way to combine the both because it's already pre-configured, and within EPM you could choose any reporting format that you'd like. Also, emission calculation, we have done a bit of experimenting if we could create something similar to the Edwards. However, we really advise you to really look at solutions that are specialized in that area because it's really not just as simple as it looks. It requires maintenance, and other systems are well fitted for that. So the first small demo, why is it data friendly, and related to that, how is it centralized in one activity ledger? So what you see here is the pre-configured page that JD Edwards will provide you with when you install release 25 on your system. It will be included automatically, so you won't have to install additional or buy additional licenses or install any additional files. What this really shows is on the right you have this sustainability activity ledger, and it's kind of a flow of how the setup behind it eventually leads into the activity ledger through either your accounts payable voucher match or your accounts payable voucher entry. For those not really working with JD Edwards on a daily basis, the voucher match is basically matching what you've received and what you ordered with the invoice that your supplier will send you when they have sent the goods to your warehouse. And at a later point in this webinar, I will also be showing how within those processes, the activity ledger is automatically populated with data like the activity that's related to it, like stationary combustion or mobile combustion. It could be the distance that's related to it, the amount, the related greenhouse gases that are combusted in the activity, and all kinds of audit information. So this is a short video. So first, going into the application, you can just click on search. We have some records already prepared. So what you see here is that on the left, you have this so-called activity source, which is basically a combination of one of your assets and the related fuel that went into it that will eventually create the combusted greenhouse gases. That's the only thing that we have set up. What the system will automatically attach to the transaction from which this record is created is something like the scope that you see on the right. So way before we matched the invoice from the supplier, we have already set up only once the activity source and what scope is related to it, what type of asset it is, and what greenhouse gases are related to it. Also, we determine, for example, for the diesel being used by the generator, if we want to use a quantity to measure it, Or, for example, used for mobile combustion, you can also say, I don't even want to only use quantity, but I also want to automatically assign the distance that's related to this activity. That's something that we set up beforehand, and eventually everything is collected in this one place. So if we open one of those records, what we'll do here, there's always a lot of columns in JD Edwards, so we prepared some so-called grids that will only focus on specific columns for example, setup in this case. So some setup fields that are related to this activity ledger are the scope that we assigned to the activity source, what kind of activity is, which is the type. So the diesel generator, the diesel used by generator is related to everything under stationary combustion. And on the right, you can also see the scope category, though that is a field that's being reserved for the scope 3 calculations. And on the far right, you also see that in this case, we don't see the diesel used by the generator as a biomass that's being consumed. When we take another look at other columns in this ledger, this is mostly transaction-based fields, which contain the date, the activity date that this record was added to the system, the consumption start and end date related to that diesel generator, and the resource quantity. So let's say that you had 990 liters that were consumed between February 1st and February 21st. And this record, when we log this in the system, that happens on the 21st of February, which is the activity date. It is possible to determine the activity date also on a GL date, for example. So you can configure that any way you'd like. On the right, we also see the distance. It could be filled in already if you want. It doesn't have to be filled in, but it's already there if you want to use this for mobile consumption. Then when we scroll to the right, we also see the item number that we already set up in JD Edwards that we use for our inventory management, for example. The supplier that's related to this, the business unit, and some transaction-based amounts. Then when we take another look, these are so-called reference fields. So as you also see on the top of this form, this is already related to an existing transaction that happened in JD Edwards. So these are the transactions you're already doing on a daily basis. In this case, it's a paid voucher in JD Edwards terms. So that way, it basically means that there's a connection between the transaction you're already doing in JD Edwards and this logged entry of the sustainability activity, let's say. And then our final one is the emission fields. These are also fields that you will see in the application that's configured to work with the sustainability activity, with the sustainability framework. On the first two fields are the CO2 equivalent fields. It could be that diesel or any other fuel will combust greenhouse gases in all kinds of with all kinds of impacts on the environment, and eventually you can kind of sum up the impact of that into one CO2 equivalent value. And those are values that are published on the internet or in respective databases that could be connected to it. It is not required to add it in JD Edwards, but these are eventually fields that will be sent to external solutions such as EPM, where it will use that data to determine the CO2 equivalent, or if you want also the amount of CO2 itself, the energy that's associated to it, and you have some remark or reference fields that you can use however you like. And then moving on to the second one is the automatic audit history tracking. So whenever we do something in JD Edwards, there's a lot of tables behind screens that are being used and that tracks what is happening, such as changing a record, adding a record, of certain transactions that's being voided because data was incorrect or it's already marked as a double count, for example, or even when one of the records is deleted. So it could be that one of your auditors comes by and asks for a random entry to this activity ledger. If we could show what happened to that ledger, who did what, and what did he or she do, and which application did it use to do so. So what we do here, first we go into one of the records that was already added in JD Edwards. I need to pause here. This is a screen that I didn't show before, but you could already go one level deeper, which is the actual greenhouse gases that are associated to this activity. And on the screen, we delete one of the records, and we're going to change the emission quantity of the first records. Then afterwards, we're going to see how we can look back and see who did what. So this is basically what we do. We take an exit, a so-called row exit, into the audit history. And what this provides us with is two records. So one was when we added this record to the system, and the second one is that there was a certain change. And this is not only on the general activity ledger record with the CO2 equivalent, but it's actually based on the emissions themselves. So we saw that it can even track the line on which it happened. So for the emission type, the one on the first, someone will probably know this from his from your chemistry background. C4F10, I'd say. That is, it was added. Then afterwards, it was changed. Then on CF4, it was added. CF4 was deleted. And eventually, we also added the CO2 one. Yeah, that's quite basic data, but when we scroll to the right, we get the audit fields that we need. So we can see who did it, what program was used, when this happened, and what time. So in this case, it all happened quite after each other. But over time, you can have a track record of anyone who has access to this database of what happened, which is great for audit purposes. And that's it for the first key benefit, which is the data friendliness. The second benefit is that it's streamlined. As we have explained before multiple times, the functionality is already embedded in your centralized ERP system, such as JD Edwards. What Oracle is planning on is to not only add this functionality in your accounts payable processes, which is the voucher match and the voucher entry, but it will also be looking into adding this into your inventory issues, into manufacturing, and meter readings, for example. So if you have a machine and it's able to, through Internet of Things, have contact with your ERP system, that could already automate the way that this ledger is being filled with the required data. So you would eventually use the application that JD Edwards has, but it doesn't have to be manually maintained. It can be automatically can be automatically processed. Also, the data is captured real time. Yeah, it could be that you don't want it real time. It's still possible to add anything on a monthly basis if you're already doing that, or maybe on a quarterly basis, or if you want to migrate from your current system, like Excel or any other tool, and to migrate the data into JD Edwards. That's also still possible. So you don't have to redo all those transactions to get that table filled. And what we believe is that this will really reduce the amount of manual adjustments afterwards. So if we just stick to our daily transactions, we keep doing what we're doing, we reference the data for environmental purposes to the transactions that we're already creating. Then we don't really have to look back in time when we do our sustainability accounting to kind of summarize all the transactions that we did this month and then determine the related emissions. I think that's really a good streamlined process. So to give you more of an idea of what that means, we have prepared one scenario. So let's say for the scope 1 direct emissions, we have our stationary combustion that we need to report on. And basically you need three things. So you have your asset, which needs to be a company-owned asset. For example, a generator, which is diesel powered. Then of course the fuel, which is diesel in this case. It's also good to look up or understand what the related greenhouse gases are. So you can also include those into your setup. And last but not least, our supplier, which for demo purposes is 123 oil. So what you will see in this demo is that we have the invoice from the supplier. That's basically what happened before the video starts. You have the invoice from your supplier way before you ordered like 1,000 liters of diesel fuel at your supplier. And we received that invoice. We have also received the 1,000 liters. We have registered that in JD Edwards. And when we do a so-called voucher match, it will be able to compare the supplier's invoice with the amounts that we actually received. That will already create the required financial transactions that we need. And additionally, it will also understand that it will need to add the required data to the sustainability activity ledger. How it knows what activity source is required, that's setup that we will cover in a training in March that Andrea will be explaining after this webinar. But it basically means that you really have to only connect that fuel or that a certain supplier or a combination of both is related to a certain activity source. And you will never have to do any additional manual steps to get this working. So we'll start from our page again. We have done the receipt. This is basically how JD Edwards works. So we first look what have we received for this supplier. What we see here is that we have received 1,000 liters with a certain item number from a certain supplier. And just visually or based on an invoice that you receive digitally, or maybe you will have this automated already, the system knows, or you know, that this can be matched. And this is what the result is. So as you already see, the activity source is automatically populated. It understood that both the combination of supplier and the item needs to be an activity source of diesel generator. That's the only thing that the system added to this transaction automatically. Based on the setup behind it, it knows that the activity type is part of stationary combustion, that it's scope 1. The name of scope 1, the date that we added this activity, the resource quantity that's related to it, which is in this case the same as the 1,000 liters. Other additional columns are the distance, which can be used for mobile combustion. So imagine that you have not an invoice that's related to stationary combustion, but related to transportation, for example, that has been carried out with a company-owned asset. Then you can also add that data in this screen or have it populated automatically. The same goes for the amount that you can also track. That's all determined in your setup if you do or do not want to track that data for that type of activity. What we also find is additional new columns that aren't there without the sustainability framework, which are the consumption start and end date. So we're actually populating that. In this case, we know that it's consumed between the 1st and 20th of February. For data quality purposes, we can also assign a certain data quality level to this entry. We can say if this is the actual emitted value, if it's estimated, or if it's metered. And you can adjust this to anything you want. You could also apply a certain other category that you'd like to have more distinction between levels of data quality. And in this case, we do not add the emission values. And that's basically it. So how then do we go from here to the activity ledger? So we basically go back one screen. We find the transaction that we just created, which is nothing related to a sustainability framework. But from there, we can take an exit to the activity ledger. And this is the nice way because it's referenced within the data in JD Edwards. It understands that it needs to go to this application and open with that transaction. So you don't go there and you see all the records, but it understands, okay, I started in the transaction we already have in JD Edwards, and I will already filter this one out for you. So you can look back and see what's associated to it. Now, the other screen that you briefly saw, that's here. Your changes have been submitted for approval and are pending review. This is a so-called workflow that's automatically triggered if you choose to use this. It's not mandatory. And this will require a sustainability manager, for example, to approve this entry. So this can be included in a month-end process or on a weekly basis or any time you want. This is really good to maintain control over all the activity all the data that's gathered for reporting purposes. To make sure that it doesn't contain the wrong quality and that it's checked either randomly or every time. Okay, so that's the streamlined and the data is captured in real time. The third key benefit, I'd say, is that it's effortless. So from when I started exploring this module in, it was, I think, November 24, there's some example documentation from Oracle, and it took only about 15 minutes to get up and running. Of course, you need to be testing, you need to follow your regular processes and your design phases when you start implementing this module. But if you're really going into the setup and eventually your master data, it's really lightweight, I'd say. It doesn't really require a lot of dependencies, and it's there if you want it. You can attach it to your existing configuration, and it's really there on the side to kind of move along with the existing processes you're already using. Another benefit is that by integrating or incorporating this functionality within your existing ERP system, you already have the advantages that you invested in a long time ago, which is that you have a secure system, you have control over who has access to what applications, and a list of other features. So if we kind of go into a step deeper, like into the setup, if here we have an example for the scope 1 stationary combustion that I showed earlier. So what we see here is that on the right, you have this activity ledger data on top in the table, which is a kind of simplified version. Then eventually everything is related to an activity source. Then the first step that we take is where is the data source of this information? So in this case, we triggered this, or we created this entry to our activity ledger from our accounts payable module. Then the next step is what's the activity source? So that's the diesel generator. And on the left, we need to know the attributes of this activity. So that could be a diesel, so that could be a fuel, or it could be a vehicle type. In this case, we don't need to track the vehicle type, so we only say that the determinant is diesel and that the fuel that's related to it is diesel. That's two things that you need to set up in case of using fuels. Why it's something we'll go deeper into one of the sessions. Then on the right is what is the type of the activity according to the GHG protocol. In this case, we know that the diesel generator that we set up is related to our scope 1 stationary combustion. And related to the activity type, we have 3 things that we set up. One is what is the determinant? In this case, it's the fuel type that we want to measure. How do we want to measure it? Well, we want to know the quantity of fuel that is being used. And then last but not least is the related greenhouse gases. In this case, we came up with some dummy values of CO2, CH4, and N2O. And on the top, you see the impact of that setup. So below we say stationary combustion is a fuel type, and we are tracking a certain quantity. So on the top, you see that the vehicle type column isn't filled and that the distance column isn't filled. Now, what if we take another scenario that has different setup, like the second or the third record? What you see there is that the vehicle type and the distance is filled in. So in that case, this is the underlying setup that we've done. So again, in this case, we don't only have being the fuel, but we also have a vehicle that we want to track. So we have better ways to report when it's being exported to EPM, for example. The activity type in this case is mobile combustion. We want to use fuel and vehicle types to, as you can see on top in the activity ledger. We want to measure both the quantity and the distance, and the emission types are basically the same because it's still LPG being used. These are just dummy values, so please don't see that as binding values. I hope that gives a kind of an indication or an idea of the required setup. For me as an implementation consultant, this is something that's very easy to understand, and that's really not hard to implement when I would be encountered with a certain business scenario. Yeah, the other point in Effortless is that we're leveraging existing ERP system capabilities. So it is possible to track all this in other systems, but as you may have already invested in your ERP system and you've used additional products, for example, those from Steltix, yeah, you can basically leverage the sustainability framework. Yeah, can basically leverage all those solutions as well. So as I mentioned before, you have AppShare, which you might be useful for the workflow approvals, for management approvals. We have e-invoicing automation. So as I said before, I've shown the manual way to perform a match, but as most of our customers are using is a way to automate this process. And it's pretty easy. We've already done design discussions within Steltix. It looks pretty easy to integrate the sustainability framework there as well. Transparent logon, so your data is already, all your other transaction data is already in a secure environment that has single sign-on or multi-factor authentication. So your data will be included here as well. If you're already prepared, collecting the data, or you may be migrating from any kind of other solution, you could be using Dropzone to shorten the time of entry into JD Edwards when you're migrating. This is also really useful if you want to perform mass transactions when you're already using the framework for on a long-term basis. Virtual Workbench is a kind of, it's more of a technical solution that you may not see from a business standpoint, but that's really useful for the consultants to reduce the maintenance that's associated to this framework, to this solution. And the last one, as Andrea also mentioned, we have this great functionality called Oracle Guided Learning, which is basically, your coach within JD Edwards that you can trigger anytime. I sometimes refer to it as the paperclip that some of you may know from the early times. It's really easy to get access to documentation. It's like on demand. It is in the environment itself, and it's really easy to onboard new colleagues or to maintain decisions that were made on how we use certain applications. So we all have one uniform way of working. So to summarize, I'd like to kind of collect those findings and to list them on from certain standpoints or functions. So from a C-level point of view, it would be beneficial to increase on your return on investment. It's quite a big investment to upgrade an ERP system and to have it running on a daily basis. So having a so-called shadow IT solution in which you do all this administration for sustainability, that wouldn't be a logical way to go from our standpoint. And also from a C-level point of view, it would be a great backbone for professional planning and forecasting capabilities. So what Oracle EPM is able to do is not only to add the additional data for emission calculation, it can also do the reporting. It can also provide planning solutions. You can even forecast on the decisions that you make as a company, how that might end up in your reporting overview, which is a very kind of great cockpit, so to say, to use. And I think if you're already using JD Edwards as your ERP, I think that's the place to start capturing the data. From a sustainability manager point of view, you may be associated a lot with audits. I think as you've seen, is that it's audit friendly. It's very detailed, and by collecting this data within JD Edwards and exporting it to a tool that's really fitted for the framework and reporting, you basically automatically comply. So you really don't need a lot of extra setup within JD Edwards, as you might have experienced with other standards like intrastat reporting. It really takes away a lot of effort and you automatically comply, which is great. Also, it really frees up a lot of time so you can focus more on actually developing the business to become greener instead of doing all kinds of administration work. I think that really is a very positive outlook for that rule. From a system administrator point of view, yeah, it's great that it's already included in your Oracle license. It's basically, yeah, the only requirement is that you would have to upgrade to release 25. If you don't have that available, which is quite logic, because it's one of the latest releases from Oracle, it is available on steltix.demo.com, so you can always play around there with the latest features. Another cool way is that it really enables a uniform way of working. Your end users are already working on a daily basis in JD Edwards. It's one environment. It has a certain way of working that everyone has been accustomed to. And having an Excel on the side or any other tool, it requires a different way of working. People have to switch between tasks. If someone is on holiday or it needs to transfer their tasks to a next colleague, it really requires a lot of onboarding time, so to say, which would be easier if it would all just be within JD Edwards. And as I've shown, you really leverage the ERP ecosystem benefits that are already there. So I hope I have given you a kind of idea of what it really practically looks like. I think it's a great combination that we've started with the regulatory part and this demo part. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Andrea to give you more an idea of the sessions that we're doing in March.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your in-depth explanations. I'm sure everyone got a great deal of information from today's webinar. So I would just like to, before we go to the Q&A session, I would like to go through the JD Edwards Learning Hub, which is an initiative that we started last year, and it's coming from our summer school, which most of you may know already. So we created this learning hub that it's tailored to every one of our customers' needs, and it's divided into 4 pillars, let's say. So the first one would be personalized training. We do personalized training in your offices or remote with an experienced instructor. We also have OGL for JD Edwards, as we have mentioned before. That's an opportunity also for onboarding users and making sure that the knowledge is consistent throughout the time in your company. Summer School, as I just mentioned as well, which is our summer school initiative, which is classes during the summers in the Northern Hemisphere and now in the Southern as well. So during July, August, and then January, February as well. And the JD Edwards campus, which is more of a bite-sized training divided into 4 sessions of 1 hour each. So if you go to the next slide, Mark, I will just share some information of something that might be of interest to you. So for the next campus sessions that we have, starting March at 4 p.m. To 5 p.m. every Wednesday, only 4 sessions. In European time zone, we have this one about the sustainability framework, and we will cover everything from the introduction to the scope 1 stationary emissions, mobile combustions, and then the integration and emission calculation on the last session. Moving on to the next campus sessions, we have the process modeler one, which is starting in March 4th. And you can see the price in there as well. It will cover the introduction to the process modeler, metrics and process analysis, advanced metrics and snapshots, and building and analyzing a sales order process. Now, if you want to register, you can just go to traingde.com We will put that in the chat now, or send me a message and I will just share the information with you. And then you can see if you like the training and you would like to join the next ones that we have, because it's really, really wide and it's always instructor led. So it's not something you do by yourself. It's always with an instructor showing you the steps and asking all your questions. So speaking of questions, we're now moving to the Q&A section. And I see here that we have 3 questions, which I will read now for you, Mark and Sander. So one is, the distance can be calculated directly by JD Edwards. I mean, in transport module, we tell them where we purchase, where is sent, and even the via to arrive there. Would JD Edwards calculate the distance?
JD Edwards can calculate the distance. Basically, if you look at transportation management, also in the route, you can put in there the kilometers or the miles to go from point A to point B. So that can be used as input for an automation to get in your activity ledger. At the moment, this is not the standard integration yet, so that is something that should be built. I hope in the near future those integrations will come with JD Edwards itself out of the box. But that is basically what we also already have shown in the roadmap, that more integrated scope 1 and 2 data from other transactions are under research at the moment. So yes, it's planned to get automatically those calculations from JD Edwards. At the moment, we can create automations for it to get the data in there.
Yeah, in addition, it's one of the ecosystem benefits that I talked about is that it's really easy to automate anything within JD Edwards, just like we're already doing, and sustainability framework is no different. So if there's any point in your transaction that we could say, okay, this is the point where we look into the system, what the distance is from master data, or maybe it's an external system that provides this data, then we can automatically populate that into the activity ledger as well.
I saw a hand risen by Carmen. Is that still applicable? Or is it okay for now?
I think there's another question.
Yeah.
From Marco. Hi, we ship our goods from Asia per container, which contain multiple items and even different weights per item. How will JD Edwards calculate the CO2 scope 3 impact?
So that is also something which is still in the roadmap to be defined by Oracle, because at the moment the sustainability framework is basically and solely for emission 1 data capturing. So scope 3, it's also on the research, and there's no exact date given by Oracle when we can expect that one.
And then we have the last one from Cameron as well, saying, I understood scope 3 will be added in JD in the future. When will you focus on scope 3? Would you connect the suppliers in JD with an ESG platform?
I think that would be a great way to connect. I've done some research also when we researched the sustainability framework. We also researched other tools, and it's really great to see other tools already specializing in that area, even sharing primary data between suppliers. I think it would be a wise way to go, and if you have ideas, please share them. I think that would be great input for Oracle as well. They're actively also looking for those for that input. Sounds great. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that looks like the end of the questions. If there is anyone else that has a question, just do it now. You can send us an email afterwards. If that's all, thank you so much, Mark, Sander, for your time, your efforts, your kind explanations. I think it was very, very informative. And I hope that all of you got some great insights from today's webinar.
Right. Thank you too for attending, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.